Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm so pleased to see so many of you here today. My name is Karine Mogg. I am the director of the Meter Center for Calvin Studies. Welcome to everyone who is joining us this afternoon for this special public lecture, which is marking the Meter Center's 40th anniversary. The Meter Center for Calvin Studies was named after Dr. H. Henry Meter of the Bible department at what was then Calvin College. It was the culmination of many years of hopes and planning, not just on the part of Dr. Meter, but other faculty, staff, and administrators at the college and the university. All of these people together dedicated themselves to a concerted effort to get the center off and running, and it opened its doors in May of 1982. Over the last 40 years, the Meter Center has focused on fostering and deepening people's awareness and understanding of John Calvin, Calvinism, and the Reformation. Located on the 4th floor of Heckman Library, so right above us, basically, that's where you find the Meter Center. The Meter Center's reading room includes a large collection of primary and secondary modern sources. We have articles, microfilm, microfiche, and a collection of about 600 rare books from the 16th century, early Bibles. John Calvin's first book. We are one of only 11 libraries worldwide that has it. That's pretty amazing. We have the Institutes, Calvin's famous book, in various languages, obviously the French and the Latin that he knew, but also in early modern editions in English, in Dutch, in German, in Italian, in Spanish. We have quite an extraordinary collection, and it has become a focal point for people in the local area, but also further afield to come and do work on Calvin and the Reformation here in Grand Rapids. Over the course of its history, we have welcomed visiting scholars from every continent except Antarctica. Over 180 scholars have come from all over the world for periods of a few weeks to a few months to do research here with us. This summer, we are expecting visiting scholars from Wales, from the University of Oxford, from the Netherlands, from the United States, from Indonesia, and from South Africa. And all these people are coming to Grand Rapids, which is really kind of amazing when you stop and think about it. We organize public lectures, special events, workshops, seminars, hands-on visits with students. Yesterday, Paul Fields, the curator of the Meter Center, and I hosted a group of 21 students from Alma College. They came down for a session with us on printing and censorship for a class that they're doing over at Alma, which was just great and so much fun for us to be able to do that. We deeply appreciate all the donors, large and small, that have supported our work over the past 4 decades. If you are interested in helping to support our work, please speak to me. I will be very excited. Today's special events are also co-sponsored by our friends at the Institute for Christian Worship, and we are grateful for their support. Today, we welcome as our special anniversary speaker, Dr. David Koyzis. He has traveled from Ontario to be with us. He obtained his PhD at the University of Notre Dame in Government and International Studies. He taught for 30 years at Redeemer College, taught political science. His publications include Political Visions and Illusions, published by InterVarsity Press in 2019, and We Answer to Another, published by Pickwick Publications in 2014. He is now a member of Global Scholars Canada. I got to know David virtually online because of our shared interest in the Genevan Psalter. David has just completed a new English versification of all 150 psalms set to Genevan psalm tunes. And we are delighted to welcome him today for his presentation. Let the people praise the enduring legacy of the Genevan Psalter. Please join me in welcoming Dr. David Koyzis.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm delighted to see so many people that I know, including some people that I taught, a man from Brazil whom I've had some connections with as well. Emily Brink, of course, I could never fail to mention her as well, and my good friend Derek Sherman, from the same part of the world. I wish I could say that I was from Antarctica so that you could at last close the circle, but alas, I cannot do that. I understand that when this was first announced, there was a newsletter that went out that said, what is Geneva's greatest export? And underneath it said, free mattresses.
Yes, exactly.
So I knew I wasn't going to take that line down. So I'm just going to get going and talk about the Psalms, because the Psalms, of course, are at the heart of liturgical life for Christians. And it's not just the Reformation tradition either. The Psalms have been part of the piety of the people of God from the very beginning, ever since David or whoever began to scroll out the first psalm, and it was sung by somebody and perhaps the whole community. The hymn book of the Bible, of course, in Hebrew is Tehillim. I'm probably mispronouncing that. My wife is the one with the seminary education, so she would probably be able to correct me. And that of course means praises, but we all know that the Psalms are filled with a lot more than praises. As a matter of fact, it seems as though the praises are it can seem that they're a minority of the Psalms as a whole, because they include complaints, they include lamentations, imprecations, the calling down God's wrath on his enemies, which I find myself resonating with those imprecations after Russia attacked Ukraine. I think that's something that I can more easily understand than I could have in the past, living in a peaceful country like Canada. The Psalms are divided in 5 books, as I think we're probably aware. The tradition says that they correspond to the 5 books of the Torah. Each book, of course, ends with a doxology. Some of the books are shorter than others. And of course, Psalm 150, one could say that whole psalm is the doxology that ends the 5th book of the Psalter. St. Athanasius, the Psalms are a kind of compendium for the whole of Scripture, because each book of the Bible is like a garden bearing its own fruit. The Psalms bear all the other fruit found in all the other books. Martin Luther said that the Psalter is the book of all saints, and everyone, whatever his situation may be, finds psalms and words in it that fit his situation and apply to his case so exactly that it seems that they were put in this way only for his sake. Calvin, in a similar vein, says that it's an anatomy of all parts of the soul, where there is not an emotion of which anyone can be conscious that is not here represented as in a mirror. Now, how were they sung? There was a woman by the name of Suzanne Pike von Tura, and she thought that she knew how they were sung. Now, I'm not a Hebrew scholar. My knowledge of Hebrew is very slim indeed. But she wrote a book called The Music of the Bible Revealed, originally in French. And she believed that there were cantillation marks in the Hebrew that were clues to how they were sung, the tunes to which they were sung. The trouble with her theory is that she combines 2 disciplines, academic disciplines that rarely speak to each other. So musicology and biblical studies. And you would have to have somebody who was an expert in both, who would be able to pronounce on the plausibility of her theory. I think it's a fascinating notion. But we do know that at least some of the songs were sung antiphonally. So there would be the cantor who would sing begin the psalm, and then there would be a line that would be sung afterwards. And of course, Psalm 136 is the one that is most familiar to us in the Old Testament. The Psalms, of course, shaped Hebrew spirituality for 1,000 years. Quoted throughout the New Testament, the second most quoted book after the book of Isaiah. And of course, they are quoted in the New Testament from the Greek Septuagint translation of the Psalms, which came to be they are still considered the canonical Psalter for the Orthodox churches. My father was raised in the Greek Orthodox Church in Cyprus, so I still have a lot of affinity with the Orthodox and the Eastern tradition. There are 150 Psalms, but they are numbered differently in the Septuagint versus the Hebrew. But it is interesting that any version of the Psalm, that the number 150 is very important. So even if they organize them somewhat differently, they all have to come to 150. That said, there is a supernumerary Psalm in the Septuagint, which I can take you to very briefly, but sometimes called Psalm 151, ascribed to David, describing what happened when he was in single combat with Goliath. And you can find that in the New Oxford Annotated version of the Bible, NRSV. The Septuagint Psalter was, of course, used by the early church. The rule of Saint Benedict, this is something that I discovered. The Benedictine practice of prayer is something that I discovered when I was about 23 years old. I went to the bookstore of Luther Theological Seminary in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I was studying in St. Paul at the time. And I picked up what I would call a Lutheran breviary. I had never come into contact with that form of prayer before, and I was always fascinated by it. It changed my prayer life, and from that point on, I began to pray what is sometimes called the divine office or the daily office. Could be 5 to 7 times a day. For me, it was either once a day in the morning or maybe twice a day, morning and evening. And it usually begins, "O God, make speed to save me. O Lord, make haste to help me," from Psalms 51, 40, and 70, where there are some duplicate lines. Read the Psalms in chorus. In the 7 times a day, I praise you for your righteous rules. This is we find in Psalm 119. These are passages that St. Benedict quoted in his rule. The Second Helvetic Confession believed that these canonical hours were a Romish innovation. We now know, 500 years later, that they were not. They go straight back to the early church and into God's people of the Old Covenant as well. Very ancient. At midnight I rise to praise you because of your righteous rules. Pre-industrial revolution, our forebears slept in 2 shifts. Biphasic sleep is called. And so it wasn't as though they had to rouse themselves at midnight to pray. They were already awakened. They'd be able to sleep for about 4 hours, they'd be up for a couple of hours and then sleep again. And that's reflected in a number of places in the Bible. This is one of them, Psalm 119. Daniel got down upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God. Acts 10, the next day as they were on their journey, coming near the city, Peter went up on the housetop to pray about the 6th hour. And the 6th hour is one of these canonical times for prayer. This is something that I got from the Lutherans, praying the Psalms over 30 days. In the Book of Common Prayer, the Psalter, Miles Coverdale's Psalter, is divided into 30 days. You can pray through the Psalms on a 30-day schedule, which I've been doing myself for about 15 years, I suppose. Limited to the monasteries, the daily office, and in the early church, almost certainly, ordinary Christians were in the habit of getting together several times a day to pray. And that practice apparently did not survive the collapse of Rome, but it survived in Islam in a slightly different form, Salat. I was in Lime Ridge Mall in Hamilton, Ontario, getting the battery changed in my watch. There was a kind of kiosk in the middle. And I was aware of somebody below. Middle Easterners were operating this. And then I saw somebody roll up a rug and get up. And it occurred to me, he was praying. And probably nobody else who was there at the time knew what was going on. But Muslims have adopted this practice. They carry it even to the present day. And I as a Christian, I rather envy them that. So I wish we, as Christians, were in the practice of doing that. Gregorian Chant is probably familiar to most of us. That's another thing that the Second Helvetic Confession thought was a Romish innovation, which we now know, of course, it was not. The church modes. This actually hangs in back of my desk in my home office. This is apparently it was cut out of a breviary. It's probably the oldest item in my collection from the Republic of Venice, 1503. And it's very old. You can see the musical notation. Gloria tibi Domine, potestas et imperium, qui cercantibus aglie, aperte monstras premium. Amen. And it's there's something else on the back side. I have this frame. At some point, I may turn it around so I can see the other side at some point. I got this at a used bookstore on Queen Street in Toronto. I think it may have been owned by Oliver O'Donovan's brother-in-law. This I will not try to sing. It's a little bit too complicated for my abilities. It's a little bit easier to sing. Miserere mei Deus, oh God, have mercy, from Psalm 50 by the Septuagint and the Vulgate number, Psalm 51 by the Hebrew number. The church modes I have been fascinated by for a very long time, because I think for those of us who listen to popular music, or may like to listen to classical music, we think of, well, there's major and minor, right? Major and minor, and if we're at the piano keys, we'll start at C, and we have the major. If we start at A, below middle C, we'll have the minor scale. But as a matter of fact, there were many more modes, and if you start at different keys, on the white keys on the piano, you'll come up with different modes. My father used to tell me, he was a Greek Cypriot. He used to tell me that Greek folk music was all in the key of E. And I didn't understand what he meant by that, but then I realized that he meant that it was in the Frisian mode. Because that's on the piano, that would be what the white keys are. So, yeah. And Byzantine chant, I'll just play you a little bit of this. This is sort of my eternal background. Apologies for the advertisements. I'm not going to play very much of it because you sing at a very slow pace, as you can probably tell. But I did want you to see something of Byzantine musical notation. Right above the words, you have the notation. You know, I can't read it myself, but it will tell you when to go down a step, when to go up a step, when to go down 2 steps, and so forth. And, Mozarabic chant, these are the Christians that lived in Spain during the Moorish period. Beatus Vir, Psalm 1, and I could play it for you, but I think I'm going to skip through it. Books of Hours, these are absolutely beautiful. As a matter of fact, as I see those pictures on the wall, they remind me very much of the medieval books of hours. So if you haven't looked at those, look at them, they're just delightful to see. And when I was a child, I was fascinated, especially by the Les Très Riches du Duc de Berry, he was a brother of one of the kings of France, and he was the regent for the king's son when he was still in his minority. So, and just beautiful, you can see the signs of the zodiac and so forth. And this is one, oh Lord, open my lips, and my mouth shall forth your praise. That's the opening of one of these prayer offices in the middle of this. This, of course, is a rosary, and I put that up there not to suggest that we all start praying the rosary, but to indicate that the origins of the rosary are in the recitation of the Psalms. Most ordinary Christians were illiterate. If they did not have the whole Psalter memorized, which many monastics did, they would have 150 beads on this, and they would go through. If they had them memorized, they could recite the Psalms, pray the Psalms. For those who were not literate and who did not memorize the Psalms, they were given other prayers like the Our Father and the Hail Mary. And again, the Rosary is not very ancient. What's more ancient is the singing of the Psalms. Now, let me come to the Reformation. This is a map of Reformation Europe. You see the Lutheran Reformation in the northern part of Europe, the dark brown, the ones that went for the non-Lutheran Reformation. I hesitate to call it Calvinist because Calvin was only one figure in what's sometimes been called the South German Reformation. But certainly Scotland, Switzerland, the Palatinate, where Frederick III, the Pious, commissioned the Heidelberg Catechism in 1563. And then, of course, there's another color for England. If Edward VI had lived, then it's possible that this map might have been colored in the same dark brown as Scotland and Netherlands. Martin Luther, this is I have to put a festival, which I absolutely love in its original rhythm. It's probably quite different from the isometric version I'm used to singing, but I do know that the Missouri Synod Lutherans sing it in its original rhythmic form, and I love to hear congregations sing it that way. Metrical psalters. Martin Luther put a Christological interpretation on his own metered psalms. And they didn't really catch on as songs within the Lutheran tradition. Lutherans are far more likely to chant the songs, whether they're ELCA Lutherans or Wisconsin Evangelical Lutherans or Missouri Synod Lutherans. So metrical songs came to be associated more explicitly with the Reformed tradition, which Calvin again was one representative. What we now know as the Genevan Psalter started in the city of Strasbourg. Strasbourg, of course, is one of the places where the European Parliament meets. It's sort of in the transitional zone between two great European powers, France and Germany. Of course, at that time it was France and the Holy Roman Empire. The beginning in Strasbourg, it went through successive editions. Aucun son ne cantique mis en chant, aucun son la forme des prières et chants ecclésiastiques. Until you finally get to 1562, when the complete Genevan Psalter was published in its I hate to say canonical form, but in recognizable form. That was in 1562, and so Clément Marot, he was the one who really started putting psalms to verse, and even Catholics in France would sing these metered psalms, which nowadays Catholics probably do not remember this, but they certainly did in France in the 16th century. He was a court poet to King Francois I. He was sympathetic to the Reformation, and he began setting psalms to verse in 1531. And he was he was one of France's literary greats. He took refuge in Geneva with Calvin because of his sympathies to the Reformation. And by the time he died in 1544, he had set 49 psalms to verse. John Calvin, as we know, he himself set several psalms to verse. Now, Calvin was absolutely brilliant. Luther was not a systematizer. Luther was just as happy talking about the devil's farts as he was talking about the Bible. Luther was he was kind of he was an in-your-face kind of a guy. And he was, he shoot from the hip. Calvin was a theological systematizer, but apparently he was not nearly as skilled as a poet, because some of his versifications were included in earlier editions, but they did not survive the final edition. And I think Calvin himself was probably humble enough to recognize that, maybe I should stick to my sermons, commenting on the books of the Bible, and and spearheading this Psalter project. Why do they not just take the Psalms, translate them from the Vulgate or from the Hebrew, and just have them chanted again? Well, this is where the Reformation seems to have been genuinely innovative. So we want all of the people to sing. We want all the people to sing these psalms. And presumably, ordinary people could chant psalms. They could be taught to sing songs. One of my sisters is a professional musician. She was actually trying to teach in a visible congregation in suburban Chicago to chant the songs. And as far as I know, I think she was fairly successful at that. But it's an acquired skill. But Calvin wanted ordinary people who man the plows, the people who are farming, the people who are their shopkeepers and so on, to be able to sing the psalms. And so he wanted the psalms set to verse in such a way that people could sing them and learn them. Interestingly enough, he had them taught the children first, and then the children would sing them, and the rest of the congregation would catch on to them. Very interesting, very interesting. Theodore de Beza, as we probably know better, he was in the next generation, and he set another 101 psalms to verse. The whole project was completed in 1560, 1562. The music was dependent in some degree on Gregorian chant, and I'll give you two examples of that in just a few moments. Louis Bourgeois, and then a certain Maître Pierre, who we don't precisely know the identity, but it's assumed it's Maître Pierre d'Arantes l'Aîné, or the elder, 1521, 1561. And Claude Goudimel, the songs were sung unaccompanied at the beginning, and in the melody only. It was thought that harmony was perhaps decadent, but there were enough people, such as Claude Goudimel, who set all 150 Genevan tunes to harmony, Renaissance harmony. They're not necessarily the way that we would, at least from my perspective, when I hear Goudimel's choral renditions, they're not quite the way that I would render them if I were to harmonize them. I'm an amateur musician. I have no formal credentials for what I do today whatsoever. I should warn you. I should have warned you at the beginning, I suppose. But Claude Goudimel, let's play Psalm 128. Beautiful. It's one of the more haunting, I think, of the Genevan psalm melodies. Some churches use lectionaries to take them through most of the scriptures over the course of about 3 years. That's something that the Roman Catholics came up with around the time of the Second Vatican Council, and it's been adopted by a number of Protestant communions as well, the Lutherans, the Anglicans, many Presbyterians and Reformed used the lectionary as well. What many of us may not be aware is that there was actually a lectionary that was used in Geneva for singing through the Psalms on a regular basis as well. So we have Dimanche au matin, that's the Sunday morning. Dimanche au soir, that's the Sunday afternoon. Après les secondes coups de la cloche, so after the second ring of the bell, then these are the songs that are supposed to be sung avant et après le sermon, so before and after the sermon. You know, those in the narrower column at the right here. So, and I think we've lost that. Even amongst those people, such as the Dutch and Hungarians who grew up with the Genevan Psalms, there are some that they will know better than others, and there will be some that they may not know at all. So I don't know how long this lectionary form of singing through the Psalms lasted, but it didn't survive in the 19th and 20th centuries, as far as I can tell. The melodies were composed for the Psalter. They were based on the church modes. Abraham Kuyper, I have to mention him because he was a very formative influence on my own development as not a musicologist, but as a political scientist, which is where my formal credentials lie. And he thought, like so many other people, that the tunes were recycled popular music. They'd taken them out of the pubs and put sacred words to them, if you will. And he also thought that the church modes had been abandoned for major and minor scales, which one has to say, das ist nicht wahr. This is not the case, not at all. So he was simply wrong. Geneva's debt to Gregorian Chant. Let me play you one melody. Now let us go to Psalm 141 from Genevan Psalter. Almost the same tune. You might not, because in different keys, you might not connect them easily, but it's almost the same tune. And somebody called that to my attention within the last 2 or 3 years. When I was at Notre Dame as a graduate student in the early 80s, I used to worship at the Sunday evening vespers behind the main altar. And Condito Ame Silio, there was a version that they would sing in English. And I remember the tune, but for some reason I didn't connect it with the Genevan tune for 141. Somebody had to call that to my attention, but yeah, so that's and they're in the church modes. So the Dorian mode, which would begin on D in the white keys of the piano, you know, it's a plurality of Genevan tunes are in the Dorian mode, because the Dorian mode seems to communicate more a wider range of emotions in the Psalms. So, you know, it could be a psalm of rejoicing, it could be a psalm of lamentation, it could be an imprecation. But the Dorian mode, you know, more than you would find the Ionian mode, which is what we would call major, or the Aeolian mode, which is what we would call minor. But the Dorian modes, or the Hypodorian mode, which begins below the tonic. You know, many of the psalm tunes are in those modes. Now, yesterday I went up to the 4th floor at the Meter Center, and Paul was kind enough to allow me to take some photos in the display case. So I decided to incorporate them in my slides today. This is just Les Sons de David, Mise en Rime Françoise. I'm going to have him on my hallway to look at this. It's a 16th century, and my eyesight is not so good here. But you could probably figure it out if this is one of the most haunting tunes of the whole Psalter. Psalms 33 and 67. It's just la 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 la. Absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Psalm 33 is longer than 67. This is Psalm 67, and this is in the it's a little bit closer to modern musical notation. That's what we're seeing here. Psalm 150 Au soir loué l'Éternel. Again, it's probably one of the most wonderful tunes of the Psalter that closes the entire collection. It's just absolutely beautiful. Yeah, that's some that's again same. Yeah, this one is some. I need to have my eyes checked when I go back next month. I understand that I have a cataract in my right eye, so that this one, all of us know this doxology, you know, praise God from whom all blessings flow. And in our hymnals in the back, it will say Old 100s, because in the Scottish Psalter of 1650, it was matched to Psalm 100. But in Geneva, it was actually Psalm 134. So this is this Psalm 100 actually has a wonderful tune again that's not very well known outside of those churches where they sings. Vous tous qui la terre habitez, chantez-vous à Dieu, chantez, servez à Dieu joyeusement, venez devant lui gaiement. And I love it. Pardon?
I learned that as a child.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
C'est merveilleux. Yeah, that's wonderful. And yeah. Did you grow up in the
Netherlands. Yeah.
in the Netherlands? Yeah. That's wonderful. Yeah. So this is a copy of the Loopwasser Psalter, which my wife gave me for Christmas about 10 years ago, I think it was. It was published, I think it's 1788, so this is a very old volume. This was translated from French into German by Ambrosius Loopwasser, who I think was at the University of Königsberg in the far eastern part of Germany, now Kaliningrad, in this Russian exclave of Baltic Sea. That's Jerzy Streis's Czech song. Let me give you a little bit of a background on this, because this is something that I discovered quite by accident when I was in Prague visiting with a student group when I was 21 years old. And I found this basically a Psalter hymnal. The chalice on the front was the symbol of the Unitas Francium, the old Hussites, pre-reformed in Bohemia and Moravia, what we now know as the Czech Republic or Czechia. I noticed that there were songs in there, but I had no idea what they were. And I looked through and I could see Malikans are now little hymnal. Songs and spiritual songs. And that's what it is in the Czech language. That's what it looks like. I probably should darken it a little bit, but I scanned it, and you can see what it looks like. And Jerzy Streis was he was a Czech reformer, if you will. He was a legal student who I believe may have studied in Königsberg with Loopwasser, but I'm not certain of that. And he translated the songs into Czech. This volume that I bought in Prague, it was published in 1900. So even during the Habsburg era, there were churches in Bohemia and Moravia in the old Habsburg Empire that were singing the Genevan Psalms in Czech language. So it took me 10 years to discover what I actually had in my own personal library. So Albert Sensi Molnar, he translated the Psalms into Hungarian. Apparently, he matched them to the Genevan tunes, all 150, in a matter of weeks. Whoa, I don't know how he managed to do that. I don't know whether that's true or not, but that's the claim. I first started setting the Genevan Psalms to verse in 1985, and I finished last August. So it took me a while. By far, that's the longest project that I've ever attempted. And I'm going to take off my jacket. It's a little bit warm in here. That's right. So Molnar, it's like a miller in Hungarian. Genfizsoltán, Hungarian. If you put Genfizsoltán into YouTube, you will get so many Hungarian choirs singing the Genevan Psalms beautifully. I venture to say that the whole of Hungary must be organized into choral societies. And that was largely the responsibility of Zoltán Kodály, whose method caught on even with the communists in power after 1945. Psalm 121. This is Koyzis. Koyzis set. He arranged 7 of the Genevan songs, and his version of Psalm
At
121.
Spectrum, we live and work in the communities we serve, and we're committed to bringing you the best internet, TV, and mobile services because, well, we count on them too. We're Spectrum, connecting the places we all call home.
Is so beautiful. It's just beautiful. I think he has good qualities. I think Zoltan Koyzis he's known for his associations with Bela Bartok before the Great War and after. They went around to places that had once been part of Hungary before 1920 and took down and they recorded some of the folk melodies that were sung in parts of what's now Romania, Serbia, Slovakia. So in addition to what Peter Dantijn, or Petrus Dantijnus, he came up with the first Dutch version of the Genevan songs, and this another one from upstairs. I took a photograph yesterday. Salmon is perfect in Babbitt's. So that's and it is this is Psalm 100. For those of you who know Dutch, you'll see that this is in a very old-fashioned kind of a spelling. Hey, volkeren des erklegs aan, sing dem Heere met blijdschap, en dient hem met herten werpen, der schijnt voor zijn aanschijn met vreugd. So that's the Psalm 100 melody that very few of us know outside of the Netherlands and Hungary, and maybe some parts of France.
It's not very well done. I mean, all the emphasis is on the wrong, on the wrong words.
I will get that to you.
Okay.
Because that was one of the motivations for my own projects.
Okay.
Oh yeah. You're very clever. You're skipping ahead. That's a young teachers on Swayland, who probably, I think his version of Psalm 96, again,
Hi, Michigan friends.
most
Small actions like installing a smart thermostat at home or using energy.
absolutely It's just beautiful. There are parts of that that just send chills down my spine. And there's a complete recording. It's called "Het Sweating Monument" in the Netherlands, and several years ago, before she abdicated the throne, a copy of this was presented to Princess Beatrix, Queen Beatrix at the time. And I haven't been able to find this recording in North America. And I'm wondering if I could write to her and borrow her copy. If she's not using the phone. Yes.
Why is it in French? Say it.
Oh, that's just the choir. You know, they chose the French versification.
Okay.
So I have a recording of Zoltan Koyzis arrangements as well, all seven, and they're sung in French as well. So, yeah. So in 1773, a new Dutch versification was approved by the States of Canada, the States General. And that's the one that was familiar to Dutch Christians right up in the 1960s when the Roetboek voor de Kerken was published. And this is my Psalter that I picked up actually in South Bend, Indiana, just the month before I went to Canada in 1987. It has all the liturgy of the Arithmetic and I have no idea where it came from. I think I'm going to skip over Psalm 116. It's in the isometric rhythm, so it's not in the rhythmic. It takes too long to go through. They don't start on the beginning note, but the organ has to play the note first for about 10 seconds before the congregation actually joins in. So I don't think I have time to go through that. This is really weird. Now, this is really weird. The Psalms in Turkish. There was a man by the name of Wojciech Lubowski, born around 1610. At either age 18 or age 28, and the source is different. He was kidnapped by the Tatars. He was a Reformed Christian in Poland. And he was sold as a slave to the Ottoman Sultan. It turned out that this Wojciech Lubowski, he at least nominally converted to Islam, because that was the way to get ahead. But I have my doubts as to whether it was a heartfelt conversion. But he took the first 14 of the Genevan Psalms and translated them into Turkish. From right to left. Yeah. Weird. And it was the Brazilian, Lucas Freire, he's the one who alerted me to this. I'd never heard of it before. I told my dad, who was in his 80s by the time about this Ali Ufki. He said, "Oh yes, I know about Ali Ufki. He translated the Bible in Turkish." So that was how he knew about him. But he's not very well known, but there are a bunch of recordings of his works. Now, I'm not going to spend much time on the English Psalms, but at least to tell you that the English language Psalms, the Scottish Psalter, the Sternhold and Hopkins Psalter, which used to be used by Anglicans up until the end of the 18th century, Anglicans were singing liturgical songs. That was the primary thing that they sang. Contemporary Anglicans don't recognize that. But it was published right in the same binding with the Book of Common Prayer. So you get the Book of Common Prayer, you get Miles Coverdale's prose Psalter, and then at the very end you would have Sternhold and Hopkins. After 1696, it was likely to be the Tate and Brady Psalter at the very end. The English psalm tradition is characterized, unlike the Genevan Psalter, by monotonous regularity. So, and each one of the tunes in the Sternhold and Hopkins, Tate and Brady, 1650 Scottish Psalter can be sung to the theme song of Gilligan's Island.
Oh,
Lord, unto thee I make my mourn, dangers may oppress. I call, I sigh, complain, and groan, trusting to find peace. So this is one of the whole book of Psalms. That was from the display case upstairs as well. New version of the Psalms by Tate and Brady, 1661. Once again. So yeah. Split leaf psalters. Scottish, because the tunes are all the same metrical structure. The verses are to the same metrical structure. They can mix and match tunes. Something you could never, ever do with the Genevan Psalms, because the Genevan Psalms are too wild and woolly. You know, they refuse to be stuck within this common meter, as it were. So I'll go through here. Isaac Watts, I'm not going to spend time on. But now let me give you something of my own story. So I grew up in a congregation of the Orthodox Presbyterian Church. This was a church in Wheaton, Illinois, where we were living. My father had been educated in Cyprus by the Reformed Presbyterians of North America, the ones who ran Geneva College. The American Academy Larnaca, Cyprus is very highly influenced by the Reformed Presbyterians. And if there had been a Reformed Presbyterian church in Wheaton, he would have taken us to that church. I could have grown up singing metrical songs on cappella. But that didn't happen. So there was another family that they started this church that was affiliated with the Orthodox Presbyterian Church. They sang from this Trinity hymnal in 1961. That's what I still have a copy of this. My mother's handwriting is in the front. But we sang metrical songs, mostly from the 1912 Psalter, which is where the Psalter hymnal came from as well. But I wasn't aware that we were singing songs because they were mixed with all the other hymns. So when we started going to a Baptist church when I was about age 11, I wasn't even aware that we used the songs. So and then I picked this up in Prague once again. And again, it was 10 years before I recognized that this was the Genevan, they were the Genevan Psalms in Czech. Book of Praise. This is something I traveled to Toronto by train in 1985. I was in South Bend, Indiana. And a friend of mine who was studying at the Institute for Christian Studies, since passed on, but he told me about these Psalms, this book of Psalms that had been published by the Canadian Reform previous year. I didn't know anything about the Canadian Reform at that time, so I picked up this book, and this is the most recent version that was published about 10 years ago by the Canadian Reform. As far as I know, they are the only group of Christians in North America that sing regularly from the Genevan Psalter. And they're right there in Hamilton. I sometimes visited their congregations, but they are not easily rendered in English. English has too many masculine, in other words, stressed endings. Not enough feminine endings. So a lot of the rhymes for the Lutheran chorales that were translated by Catherine Beekworth, some of these people in the mid-19th century, they'll use a lot of salvation, these Latinate phrases, redemption, because those are easy to rhyme in English. And so there's going to be a preponderance of those kinds of texts. But the stresses in the text do not always match the stresses in the tune. And that's one thing I noted from the very beginning. It's true even of the original French verses. So this is in Psalm 13. Jusqu'à quand as établi, Seigneur de me mettre en oubli, et sans jamais par combien d'âge, détourneras-tu ton visage, de voilà d'angoisse remplie. And again, if you know French, you'll immediately see that the stresses in the text do not match the stresses in the tune. So this suggests a different rhyming scheme. So this is what I came up with a number of years later. It's a partial rhyming scheme at best. How long, O Lord, must I endure? Will you forget me forever? Shall I look on your visage never? How long shall my soul constant pain endure, and my poor heart be in sorrow? So that's what I attempted to do. And unlike Albert Saint-Simon, I couldn't do that in 180 days or however long it took him to do that. So I started doing this in the mid 80s and finally finished last year. So I started before I started teaching, and then I retired now, and I started a few years after my retirement. Shall my foes have the victory? Answer me, Lord, hear my pleading. Lighten my eyes, my voice be heeding, lest mortal sleep should overshadow me, and enemies think me vanquished. And another one, see, let's see. Oh Lord, do not chastise me, nor in your wrath despise me. Be merciful, O Lord. My strength is slowly failing, my bones within are wailing. How long, oh Lord? So, yeah, but most of the songs that I put to verse are actually unrhymed. And I think that's much better than trying to force the text into an artificial rhyming scheme. Let the text speak for itself. Let the text grab people in the pews. You know, if you look at Keith and Christian Getty's songs over the last 20 years that have become so popular in so many churches, sometimes they rhyme, sometimes they don't, but they are brilliant. Probably the ones that are going to last into probably the 22nd centuries, and some of my grandnephews and grandnieces will probably live into, and they'll probably be seeing those, you know, and I hope that the Genevan Psalms can be rendered in form that people will sing them in English in another 100 years. So I don't know whether they'll be my text, my versifications or not, I don't know. But here's Psalm 150, the Genevan Psalter's grand finale. Praise the Lord with joyous mirth. Praise Him in His household earth. Praise Him in the heavenly height. Praise Him for His acts of might. Alleluia, alleluia. Praise His all surpassing grace. Bow and sing before His face. Alleluia, alleluia. Praise God with the trumpet sound. Hark and His praise resound. Lay the timbrel dance His praise. Strings and flute extol His ways. Alleluia, alleluia. Clashing cymbals praise the Lord. All that breathe with one accord. Praise the Lord, sing hallelujah. I have a website devoted to this. I'll just show you how you can find it. There it is. So it's actually a blog, but it also has associated pages where a lot of this material can be found. So you know, type in my surname. Don't misspell it. It's easy to do. Koyzis. Koyzis, Genevan Psalter, and this will come up.
Well, David, thank you so much. We will have a little time for questions and discussion. Talk to us a little bit about the process. Like, did you start at Psalm 1 and then keep going all the way through, or did you pick and choose? How did you decide how to do this?
Pick and choose, yeah. So I think one of the Psalm 46 was one of the early ones I did. Psalm 150 was one of the early ones too, although I ended up changing the text to some degree. Psalm 23, I came up with two different texts for that one. One rhymed and the other one did not, which was actually closer to the biblical text. And then I expanded from there. And then finally, I think as of last June, I had 86 or 87 psalms that I had set to verse, and I had come up with musical arrangements for them as well. done with this noteworthy composer software. Last year, I applied for it and received a grant from the Stanford Reed Trust. That allowed me to spend virtually the next 2 months just working through them methodically. I finished on the 13th of August. Much to my astonishment, because I hadn't thought that I was going to finish. I'd set myself the goal of doing 30 of them and then actually upgrading the website. But I ended up spending all my time on the versifications. So yeah, I was kind of surprised at myself.
Wow. Questions for David? Yes, go ahead.
You say you've done all 150? Is that sometime in the future being published?
I hope so. I hope so. Yes, I'm trying to get permission to use the arrangements by these two Dutch organists in the 1940s, Jacques-Pierre Beckers and Jacob Kort. And they were hired. This was a project spearheaded by Hendrik Casper in the Netherlands, who wanted to speed up the singing of the psalms and put them in the original rhythm. So he was, liturgical reform. That was what he was trying to do. It's this long name about in Dutch, the treasury of the Church of the Ages. It says foundation for the song of the treasury of the Church of the Ages. I believe that the copyrights are owned by Royal Yonkwood in the Netherlands, but they can't find any documentation for it.
My dad used to have a number of them, but
Yeah.
I wish I had kept them.
Yeah, they're out of print, but the arrangements are so good, and I think that they deserve to be brought back into print. So I'm trying to. I received a kind of note from Royal Yonkwood saying, "Well, if we do own the copyright, you have the permission to use it." But I think I have evidence from somebody just last month that I was meeting, an elderly Dutch Christian Reformed woman in Hamilton, and I think I have the evidence that they need, that they actually do have the rights to this. And it's in the book that she gave me of Dutch hymns. And I'm hoping I can find somebody. If you know somebody who wants to publish them, do let me know.
Other questions for David? Go ahead, Otto.
Otto, yes.
Yeah, thank you very much, David. Yeah, just for anecdotally, I should say that I grew up in Psalms.
Oh, yes, of course you did.
Yeah,
That's right.
and,
Yes.
Just for the anecdote for the book of praise, when I went to school, we had to learn a new song every week, and we went through them all as my memory.
Wow.
So in the churches, it was very not every song was sung every Sunday.
Yeah.
My father was.
And he was a professor
You
at
could
the
sing them or you could
Yeah.
say them.
My mother
Otherwise you
always
was
said,
called
to
dead
learn them
singing
is
them.
to sing it every night before you go to bed, then you'll know it on Monday morning.
Well, one time we were standing behind the microphone after the church service at our church in Hamilton. It's an old church, it's about the building is 110 years old, but the congregation itself is about 180 years old. And I was standing there with my daughter, and I started singing my metrical versification of Psalm 47. She joined right in with me. So, which is just delightful. She was in high school at the time. Otto, yes.
Yeah, I just want to add after that anecdote, there's something about Canadian tunes though that they're part of a social marker for the people who've grown up in that, and also a signifier, at least when I was growing up, what it meant to be truly reformed.
Yeah.
And if you've left that tradition, it can be quite hard coming back to hear them. As I was saying to Derek here, almost a post-traumatic song. Disorder, because it brings up so many memories of what those songs were part of.
Yes, of course.
And of conservative reform outlook on things.
Which is
So,
completely different from me because I came to them fresh.
Yeah, I know, and that's a
Yeah.
great thing.
Yeah.
So it's really
And in my head, I hear them like Renaissance madrigals. So I don't hear them like Dutch congregations singing equal notes. I don't hear that at all. So yeah.
Go ahead.
I remember we sang them in equal notes, and then after the war, we were asked to stay after church, and then we learned to sing litanies. That's what it was called. And that's when the new book came out and it was on.
And that was probably Asper's. You're trying to get people to sing in the original.
We always stayed and learned about.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's great. You know, and I've come to the point now where, you know, probably I don't have a drop of Dutch blood in me, but I think my wife and daughter are both descended from William the Silent. But I'm neither boasting about, but or complaining about it. But when I can hear somebody read a psalm in church, you know, and I'll hear the tune going through my head, the Genevan tune, because I worked with him for so long. Not all of the songs can I do that, but I'll hear, like if somebody's Psalm 100, I'll get the tune of the Psalm 100. So, yeah.
You know?
Emily, yes.
Are you aware of the Misaki Suzuki
Yes.
translation
Yes.
into Japanese?
Yeah.
Because Japanese churches are now singing the Genevan Psalter thanks to that Bach song.
That's right.
Still,
And I love the arrangement of Psalm 47 on the accordion. Absolutely beautiful. You can probably find it on YouTube. Yeah, just brilliant.
You know?
General comment and a question.
Okay.
General comment about Psalm 100 again. My work currently is on the translation of the Genevan Psalms into 17th century Malay and 18th century Japanese, brought by the Dutch. And Psalm 100 was the very first psalm to be translated into Malay in 1629.
Whoa.
And then the same tune was used for the canticles, like prayer before the sermon, prayer before evening prayer, morning prayer, the same tune. So what I'm trying to say is that Psalm 100 is very famous.
Yes.
And there are reports that even I read that said at the Synod of Dort,
Right.
the procession and the prelude,
Yes, yes.
it was Psalm 100, the tune of Psalm 100.
Now, are you from Indonesia?
I'm from Indonesia. And my question is now Psalm 151,
Yes.
because in the Malay translation of the Psalms, Psalm 151 is also translated. Now,
Really? What
yes,
about David and Goliath?
yes, exactly.
Oh,
Now
interesting.
I can trace this back to Datanus,
Yeah.
but my question is, where did Datanus get his sources from? If you could help me, I would be forever thankful.
I didn't know that. Oh, you've helped me because I didn't know that. Can you send me an email? Can you?
We will
Put
put
you
it
in
in
touch.
touch.
We'll
Yes.
put you in touch.
Yeah, please, yeah. And anybody else who wants to connect with me via email, I'm easy to find. Just look up my surname. It's on my blog. I have 2 blogs, 3 actually, but one is I've devoted my Global Scholars Canada work. The other one is devoted to the Genevan Psalter. Sometimes there's a Polish Psalter, Jan Kochanowski and Nikolai Gomoka. Again, virtually unknown outside of Poland. Absolutely beautiful. It's like the Polish Renaissance meets metrical psalm. There's so much. I could talk to you for 2 days about all this stuff. You know, I would love to lead a workshop.
I'm sure there'll be some
about all this
people
stuff.
wanting to stick around and talk, and that will be great. But before we close this session, everyone should know this is a double header event, okay? So you've had the lecture this afternoon. Tonight at 7 p.m., find your way to the seminary chapel. We are doing a community psalm sing, okay? So what we're doing is we're pairing Genevan settings of the psalms with a modern day setting of the same psalm. And everyone's going to get to sing, okay? It's going to be a lot of fun. So 7 o'clock in the chapel for the continuation of our celebration. And before anything else, please join me in thanking our speakers.
This is delightful, and I want to. This is a Brazilian habit. I have a Brazilian friend sitting over here, and they say abraços, which means hug.
Yeah.
Virtual hugs.